Welcome back to the deep dive. It is late night, or at least let's pretend it is. The lights are low, the world outside is completely quiet, and we are about to crack open a window into a reality that is, frankly, stranger than anything fiction could ever cook up.
It really is the perfect time for the strange, isn't it? And tonight we're dealing with material that absolutely challenges the bedrock of what we think is, real. We aren't just talking about abstract philosophy here. We're talking about the literal physics of the invisible.
Oh, absolutely. We are diving way back into the archive. Specifically, we are looking at the early sessions, Book 9 of the Seth Material. And just to set the context for everyone listening, these sessions were recorded between July 10th, 1968 and January 19th, 1970.
Right. A very turbulent time in the outside world. You had Vietnam, the moon landing, massive cultural revolutions. But inside the apartment of Jane Roberts and Robert Butts in Elmira, New York, something arguably just as revolutionary was happening on a very quiet scale.
Exactly. And before we get too deep into all the spooky stuff, we do need to make our standard declaration. This podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, to explore, and maybe get just a little chilled to the bone.
For sure. And we should probably introduce the players for anyone who is joining us for the first time. So we have Jane Roberts, the author and poet who enters a trance state. Through her speaks Seth, an energy personality essence who is no longer focused in physical reality. And then there is Robert Butts, her husband, who is basically the scribe, creating the transcripts we're reading today. Seth actually refers to Jane as Rupert and Rob as Joseph.
The dynamic trio. Now, our mission for this deep dive is, well, it's pretty wild. We are going to explore the mechanics of how we create our own reality. And I don't mean that in a metaphorical, just think positive kind of way. We mean it in a literal, biological, physics-based way. We're getting into the fluidity of time, the biology of spontaneity, and honestly, the incredibly spooky ability of the human mind to project physical forms.
And when you say project physical forms, you aren't talking about holograms or tricks of the light. You're talking about something much more visceral.
I am. Let's just jump right into the first part of this, which we can call the York Beach apparitions. This comes directly from session 422. This story, it's got a real Twilight Zone flavor to it, but with an actual biological receipt attached.
It really does. It centers on an incident that happened to Jane and Rob while they were on vacation in York Beach, Maine. This was back in 1963, so years before this specific session was even recorded. But Seth uses it as this fascinating case study to explain exactly what happens when we repress our emotions.
Okay, so picture the scene. It is a dance hall. It's crowded. It's noisy. There are people dancing everywhere. It's got that sort of frenetic vacation energy where you feel like you really should be having fun. But Jane and Rob are there, and they are not having a great time. They are feeling
psychic discontent. That's how Seth later analyzes it. And this is a really key term for you to remember. It wasn't just that they were bored or tired. They were harboring aggressive and destructive energies that they were feeling, but entirely denying. They were putting on this polite vacation mode face, but internally, they were just churning.
Right, and because they pushed it down so hard, something totally terrifying happened. They looked across the room and they literally saw themselves. But it wasn't a mirror.
No, not a mirror at all. Seth describes the visual so vividly. He says the images they saw were older, weary selves, the lines of bitterness clearly written in the features.
Just imagine that for a second. You look across a crowded, sweaty dance floor, and you see a version of yourself that has completely given up. Just bitter, frustrated, old. It's like the ghost of Christmas future, but It's physically standing there. And this is where I want to push on the mechanics of it, because Seth is incredibly specific. He claims these weren't just hallucinations playing tricks in their brains, right?
That is the crucial technical breakdown here. Seth says these images had temporary physical validity. They were pseudo-images. Normally, we think of a hallucination as just a software glitch in the brain. You see something that simply isn't there in the room. But Seth is saying, no, the object was there. It was actually created by them in the space.
And the proof, or at least the evidence Seth points to, is the literal physical toll it took on their bodies.
Exactly. This is the part that usually gets glossed over in standard metaphysical discussions. We think of projecting as a purely mental act, but Seth says it takes a massive toll on the biological body. He specifically points out the protein loss and high carbohydrate loss that Jane and Rob experienced.
That part stopped me right in my tracks when I was reading this. You are literally burning your own protein to create a monster in the corner of the room.
In a very real sense, yes. The physical body has to work overtime to lend chemical structure to these emotional projections. Seth explains that the emotional charge provides the pattern, the blueprint, right? But the physical body, Jane and Rob's actual biology, had to sacrifice portions of its own chemical structure to build these things. It creates a literal deficit.
So the body is essentially acting like a 3D printer. The emotion is the digital file, and your protein is the filament.
That is a perfect analogy, and Seth connects this exact mechanism to physical illness. This is where the insight gets super practical for anyone listening. Seth argues that physical illness is often just another form of this misplaced creative energy.
Okay, let's unpack that, because that heavily implies a choice, whether it's conscious or not.
Well, if you have that psychic discontent or denied emotions, that energy has to go somewhere. Basic physics, energy cannot be destroyed. In the York Beach case, because the environment was chaotic and the energy was so intensely high, they projected it outward into these creepy doppelgangers. But if you don't project it outward...
You project it inward.
Exactly. You use that exact same chemical manipulation to form an ulcer or a tumor or even just chronic joint stiffness. It's the exact same creative force. It is the same protein and carbohydrate manipulation, just directed against the self because the personality refuses to consciously accept the emotion.
That is terrifyingly logical. If you don't like the design file of your emotions, you print a monster. If you don't print the monster, you print a sickness. So how did they actually get rid of the York Beach apparitions? Did they have to mentally fight them off or something?
No, and that's the real lesson of the session. They faced the bitterness. They looked at those weary figures and essentially admitted, okay, that bitterness is a part of me. That aggression is mine. And once they accepted the emotion, the energy returned to them. The images just vanished.
It's the ultimate face your demons story.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, if you are sitting in your living room right now feeling resentful or angry, what kind of invisible geometry are you spinning in the air right next to you?
And what vitamins are you depleting to do it? It gives a whole new meaning to feeling drained after a bad argument. You might literally have mass-produced some pseudo-forms in your kitchen.
Wow. I'm tired. I must have been 3D printing ghosts all afternoon. But moving on from space ghosts to something equally mind-bending, let's talk about time. This brings us to the next segment. In these sessions, specifically around session 424, 429, and 432, Seth really tries to break Rob and Jane out of the linear clock mindset.
He certainly does, and he uses one of the absolute most memorable analogies in the entire Seth Material to explain the dimensionality of time.
I love this quote so much. Rob is pressing him for a concrete definition of time, and Seth, probably with a little twinkle in Jane's eye, says, time is an apple. Time is no apple. Time is a worm in an apple.
It sounds almost like a Zen koan, doesn't it? But it's actually a incredibly tight analogy for dimensionality. If you are a worm inside an apple, your whole reality is just the kernel you're eating through. You don't see the whole apple, you just see the next bite. Your past is the tunnel behind you, and your future is the pulp ahead.
But the apple itself, the whole physical structure exists all at once. The skin, the core, the seeds, they are totally simultaneous.
Exactly. To the worm, it's a linear sequence. To someone outside the apple, it's a solid, existing object. Seth is teaching the concept of simultaneous time. He states very clearly, events are materialized in your time from their origins in no time.
No time. That sounds like a heavy sci-fi concept. Is he saying time just flat out doesn't exist?
He's saying linear time is a biological construction we use to organize our physical experience, but the fundamental reality is what he calls the spacious present. Past, present, and future are all existing right now. We are just focusing our consciousness on one incredibly thin slice of it at a time.
He also uses this Weaver analogy that I found incredibly helpful to visualize it. He talks about a miraculous webwork of probability.
Yes, imagine a massive spider web. We usually think we are walking down one single, inescapable thread Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But Seth says there are infinite threads above and below branching out constantly, and if we knew how, we could actually leap between them.
So we aren't stuck on the timeline.
We definitely aren't stuck on a single timeline. We literally weave our reality by choosing which probabilities to activate. And this actually connects to something really interesting he said about animals. Because we humans are so obsessed with clocks and calendars, we think we're the absolute experts on time. But Seth says animals, plants, even rocks perceive time completely differently.
Right. He mentions they perceive time as intensities of experience rather than ticking seconds.
Their present is actually much wider than ours. A dog isn't thinking about 5 minutes ago or 5 minutes from now in a strict linear sense. It is sitting in a bubble of now that is deeper, thicker. It's entirely about value fulfillment for them.
Value fulfillment. It's a term Seth uses a lot throughout the books. It basically means the innate drive of any consciousness to fully express its potential.
Right. Correct. And for the larger entity, which is the part of us that isn't solely focused in this one physical body, time isn't linear either. It holds the memories and experiences of all its lives simultaneously, which leads to this total brain-melting implication Seth drops. A future event can actually exist before a past event.
Wait, in terms of cause and effect, how does that work?
In terms of intensity and magnetic pull, if a future event is highly intense or meaningful, say, a massive career success or even a traumatic accident, that event acts like a massive magnet. It can pull the past towards it. The cause doesn't always have to precede the effect in the neat little way we think it does. We might be making subconscious decisions today specifically because of something that happens 10 years from now.
That is, man, I need a moment to let my brain unpretzel itself. Time is an apple. I'm definitely going to be thinking about that the next time I'm in the produce aisle.
Just watch out for the worm.
Always watch out for the worm. Now, let's bring this back down to earth, or at least down to the physical body. This next part is all about spontaneity and health. And poor Rob. Reading these sessions, you really feel for the guy. He was having some rough physical trouble.
He was. In session 422 and 455, we learned Rob was suffering from some pretty severe physical stiffness. Just constant aches, pains, vastly reduced mobility.
And typical of us humans, we'd probably just say, oh, I slept wrong, or I need a new mattress, or I'm just getting old. But Seth doesn't play that game. He goes straight to the psychological route.
He tells Rob bluntly that he is putting a lid on the pot. The stiffness wasn't a purely structural issue. It was the physical manifestation of his deep fear of his own spontaneity.
The spontaneous self is the healer. That quote really stood out to me from the reading.
It's beautiful, and it's completely counterintuitive for many of us, especially if we are type A personalities. We tend to think that control is what keeps us safe. We budget, we plan out every detail, we physically brace ourselves against the world. But Seth tells Rob that he is actually safest when he is most fluid, like wind or water.
Because being a statue is incredibly dangerous. Statues break when you hit them. Water just flows around the impact.
Exactly. When you repress that spontaneous energy, whether it's a creative urge, an emotion, or just a sudden desire to do something different, you create rigidity in your own body. You are literally holding yourself back and your muscles lock up to do the job. You are fighting a war with yourself, and the physical stiffness is just the battle scar.
Seth gets surprisingly specific with his health advice here, too. And it's quirky. It's definitely not your standard eat your veggies routine.
It is very idiosyncratic to Rob's specific body chemistry at that moment in time. He tells him to avoid acid fruits, specifically grapefruit, if he's combining it with milk.
So goodbye to the breakfast grapefruit.
And he also says to avoid chocolate during periods of fluid retention. But honestly, the most fascinating part isn't the diet advice itself, but the core philosophy behind it. Seth talks extensively about pills and supplements. Rob was taking something seemingly minor, maybe a fiber supplement or an over-the-counter pill, thinking it was totally inert, just a mechanical helper for his body.
And Seth corrects him on that. This is a huge, huge point. He says there is absolutely no such thing as an inert substance once it enters the human body.
Right. He says the body's stress reaction changes them.
That is profound to think about. You swallow a pill thinking it's just basic chemistry doing a predictable job, but your belief system, your stress level, your expectation, it completely alchemizes that substance.
It connects right back to the York Beach monster we talked about. Your body is constantly manipulating matter based entirely on your emotional state. Even a plain sugar pill isn't just sugar if your body decides to turn it into something else based on your fear or your expectation of what it will do.
So if I take a vitamin, but I take it with this underlying stressful fear that I'm definitely getting sick, I might actually be altering its chemical effect inside me.
According to Seth, yes. The chemical isn't a fixed, independent constant. It interacts with the complex electromagnetic environment of your body, which is governed completely by your thoughts and emotions.
And Seth, being Seth, can't help but crack a joke about Rob's reluctance to follow this strange advice. He says he will make an artist's helper out of me yet.
He has a very dry, sharp wit. He knows perfectly well he's giving advice that sounds bizarre to a 1960s American man, but he insists it's highly practical. He wants Rob to be fluid, both in his painting and in his physical joints.
Speaking of bizarre, let's move to the next segment. We've titled this High Strangeness. We're getting into math, molecules, and fetuses. And honestly, this might be my absolute favorite part of the deep dive because of the sheer absurd incongruity of it.
You're talking about session 450, the infamous math session. Now, keep in mind for everyone listening, Jane Roberts was a poet and a fiction writer. She was not a mathematician. She had absolutely no interest in advanced theoretical constants or equations.
But suddenly, out of nowhere, she goes into this incredibly deep trance and starts channeling a personality who is just furious.
Absolutely livid. It seems to be a mathematician, possibly linked to Fermat or Democritus, someone from that historical era. And he is passionately ranting about problems in infinity, discussing quadrants, and complaining about being expelled by ground rules.
Expelled by ground rules. It really sounds like he got kicked out of some cosmic university for breaking the physics code.
He felt his grand theories had been stolen or terribly misunderstood by, quote, little men. He's talking about complex constants and variables with this intense, visceral, emotional heat.
And the humor of the situation is just here, is Jane, who probably couldn't calculate a restaurant tip without a pen and paper, and no offense to Jane's math skills at all, but she's furiously lecturing the room on advanced number theory.
It really validates the phenomenon in a strange way. Why would Jane's subconscious mind bother to invent a furious historical mathematician whose concepts she doesn't even understand? It strongly points to that miraculous web work we talked about earlier. She's tapping into a completely different thread of reality.
And from angry math, we pivot straight to embryology. This is sessions 499 and 502. This gets deep into what you might call the embryology of the soul.
This specific topic was actually prompted by a class member named Sue, who was pregnant at the time. She asked a very practical question for their group about astral projection while you're carrying a child.
And Seth drops an absolute bombshell of a biological and spiritual fact. The fetus has its own astral form.
Yes. He explains that the incoming consciousness utilizes cosmic energy to literally break through into physical matter. It is an incredibly high-energy, demanding event.
So when the mother projects, when she has a conscious out-of-body experience, does she accidentally take the baby's soul with her?
Seth says no, she doesn't. The astral fetus stays securely with the physical fetus. The mother's consciousness is completely free to travel, but the developing entity is laser-focused on building its new physical vehicle. It's busy. It doesn't want to go sightseeing.
Right. It's got serious work to do. It is 3D printing an entire body from scratch. Which brings us perfectly to the actual mechanics of how it prints that body. This is where we get to the concept of EE units.
Electromagnetic energy units. This is the absolute bedrock physics of the entire Seth material. If you want to understand how a thought literally becomes a thing, you have to understand EE units.
So define it for us. Break it down. What exactly is an EE unit?
Seth says thoughts and emotions form of their own electromagnetic reality, vitalized physical products. So an EE unit is the bridge. It is the incipient beginning unit of physical matter.
So it's like a subatomic particle.
Yeah.
Or even smaller than that.
Even smaller. It exists below the level of the atom. You have an emotion. That emotion isn't just invisible smoke. It radiates these actual EE units. These units then congregate and condense, based entirely on the emotional intensity, to eventually form physical matter, like atoms and molecules.
Okay, tying this all together. Going back to York Beach, Jane's intense bitterness formed massive amounts of EE units, which then condensed into the weary doppelganger in the room.
Correct. And in the womb, the incoming soul's intense desire for physical life forms E units that rapidly condense into the growing cells of the fetus. It is the exact same creative mechanism at play.
Consciousness always comes first. Matter is just the end result.
That is the core thesis of everything Seth teaches. Matter is simply the camouflage. Consciousness is the primary underlying reality.
Which brings us to a very practical, grounded application of all this, art and career.
Yeah.
Because Rob is a working artist, and he's actively trying to make a living. And Seth turns into a bit of an art critic and career counselor.
It's delightful to read. In session 495 and 496, Seth gives Rob incredibly specific, actionable advice. He's not just talking about the grand journey of the soul. He's telling him exactly where to go sell his paintings.
He mentioned specific street intersections in New York. He talks about 6th Avenue and 61st Street and 72nd Street.
He's looking at the active probabilities. He sees exactly where Rob's artistic frequency would resonate with buyers. But he also critiques the physical work itself. He jokes about the Ashkin School of Art, which was a real historical movement focused on gritty, realistic urban life, and he discusses exactly how Rob's pop art fits into that lineage.
But the best piece of advice he gives, I think, is the fly's eye view.
Oh, this is a beautiful exercise in shifting perception. Seth encourages Rob to paint fruit. But not just a standard bowl of fruit sitting on a table. He wants him to paint it from the direct perspective of a fly, or maybe a squirrel.
Why, though? Is it just to be creatively different and stand out?
It's entirely about value fulfillment again. To truly understand the apple, you have to understand what the apple means to the fly. To the fly, the apple isn't just a quick snack. It is a massive mountain. It's a vast terrain. It is an entire universe of scent and sugar.
And then Seth drops this massive philosophical hammer. He says, "You are what you perceive."
It deeply implies that perception isn't a passive act of just watching a movie. When you look at an object, you are electromagnetically interacting with it. You change the object, and the object changes you. If you walk around perceiving the world as a fundamentally hostile place, you literally become a hostile world perceiver, and the physical world reinforces that reality back to you.
So changing your perspective, like literally imagining you are a fly looking at a giant apple, changes your own chemical structure.
According to Seth, yes. It completely changes your electromagnetic output. It breaks you out of your rigid, stiff patterns. It forces you to become spontaneous again.
And regarding the practical career advice, Seth makes a point that I think absolutely every creative person out there needs to hear. He tells Rob that the tedious search for a gallery isn't just an annoying business necessity.
No, not at all. He says the search itself is creative fuel. Putting yourself out there, actively facing rejection, finding the exact right fit for your work, that entire process feeds the art itself. It is a vital part of the creation, not something separate from it.
I really love that perspective. Marketing your work isn't a dirty word. It's just part of the ongoing energy exchange.
Precisely. It is extending your own E-units out into the broader world to see what they connect with.
Finally, let's talk about the entity himself. Let's look at the voice in the darkness. Who or what exactly is Seth? We get some really fascinating glimpses into his reality in Book 9.
We really do. Jane actually describes the physical, bodily sensation of channeling what she calls the larger entity of Seth. She refers to it as the pyramid effect.
She describes feeling this massive cone or pyramid of energy around her, and the voice
Yes.
completely changes, right?
Yes. Normally, Seth sounds like Seth. Very conversational, robust, distinct. But when the larger entity speaks the massive source consciousness behind the Seth persona, the voice becomes high, thin, clear, and distant. It suggests these vast layers of personality. Seth isn't just one guy sitting on a cloud. He is a specific focus of a much larger, incredibly vast consciousness.
And there's this really funny discussion about whether Seth is just always hanging around their apartment. Like, is he constantly watching them brush their teeth or argue over dinner?
Seth quickly reassures them about that. He says he is simply tuned in to their emotional impetus. He isn't watching them constantly like a creepy security camera. He's alerted by major energy spikes. If they really need him or if their emotional intensity flares up, he's instantly there.
There's also a great moment where Seth gives advice to a visiting minister, Jim Crossan. And this really shows Seth's fundamental attitude toward organized religion.
He directly tells the minister to leap over the fences of dogma. Seth isn't anti-religious at all, but he is completely anti-limitation. He firmly believes that God, or all that is just too massive to be fenced in by one single human denomination.
It's the chill factor for me. Throughout all these early sessions, you get this creeping realization that Seth has total access to their private thoughts, their unremembered dreams, and even their future probabilities.
It creates a profound sense of total transparency. You literally cannot hide from your own soul, and Seth represents that ultimate level of awareness.
So to start wrapping this massive topic up, what have we actually learned from this deep dive into the 1960s archives?
We've learned that our repressed emotions are physically powerful, powerful enough to literally create temporary ghosts in the room or chronic illnesses in our bodies. We've learned that time is definitely not a straight line, but a complex apple we can bite into from any angle.
We've learned that spontaneity is the absolute key to physical health. Don't be a rigid statue. Be fluid like water.
And above all, we've learned that consciousness precedes matter. We build the physical world with our thoughts, literally forming the atoms, those EE units, with our deepest desires and fears.
It is a lot to take in. And remember, we are just barely skimming the surface of the early sessions, Book 9. There are hundreds of pages of this.
If this snarps your curiosity at all, please don't just take our word for it. Read the original source. These sessions are incredibly dense, challenging, and deeply rewarding.
Huge credit to the publisher, New Oris Network, for keeping this vital material alive and accessible. And you can find these books, original recordings, and a lot more at their website. Just go to setcenter.com/early sessions. Seriously, go check it out for yourself.
It is an absolute library of the mind.
So here's our final provocative thought for you to chew on tonight. If Seth is right, and your current physical reality is just a direct projection of your internal emotional energy, take a good look around your room right now.
What do you actually see?
Are you seeing clarity, essence, beauty? Or maybe, just maybe, what kind of York Beach monster might you be quietly creating in the corner of your living room right now, completely without even knowing it?
And much more importantly, how do you turn that monster back into pure energy you can actually use?
Face the bitterness. Acknowledge it. Let the energy return to you.
And always trust your spontaneity.
Thanks for diving in with us tonight. We will see you in the next probability.